I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. When Adam looked up from his plate, casually pushed a piece of chicken around with his fork and said, "You've really let yourself go." I just blinked. No warning, no tension, just those words, dropped like crumbs on the table between us. He didn't even make eye contact, just kept eating like he hadn't detonated a grenade in the middle of our marriage. "Fat," he said next, still not looking at me. "I don't mean it to be mean, Jules, but you're not, you know, desirable anymore." There it was, the line that gutted me more than any argument ever could. I remember the sound of the air conditioner humming in the background, the clink of his fork, the way my breath caught in my throat. Not because I didn't see it coming, but because I finally realized he'd stopped loving me a long time ago. And I'd been too busy surviving to notice. 6 years of marriage, 2 kids, a house that felt like it was built from responsibilities instead of bricks. I worked, I cleaned, I raised our children. I made sure the bills were paid, the fridge was stocked, the school forms were signed. I stayed up late ironing his shirts when he had meetings. I planned his birthday parties, his parents' anniversary dinners, every damn detail of our life. I gave and gave until there was nothing left in me. And he decided I was the problem because I didn't look like the 26-year-old he married. I didn't say anything that night. I finished dinner in silence, scraping my half-eaten food into the trash after he'd gone to the living room to watch TV. I stood in the kitchen with trembling hands, staring at the reflection of myself in the microwave door. Puffy eyes, tired face, slumped shoulders. I didn't look fat to me. I looked exhausted. I looked like someone who'd been putting everyone else first for so long, she forgot what it felt like to be seen. 2 nights later, I saw the text. I wasn't snooping. I'd picked up his phone by mistake, thinking it was mine. Same case, same model. The screen lit up with a message from someone named Kayla. It said, "I wish you were here instead of her." I froze. My stomach twisted. I unlocked it, and there it was. Weeks of texts, late night flirting, photos, complaints about me, about how I let myself go, how I nag, how I don't get it. I didn't confront him right away. I wanted to believe there was some explanation, some mistake, but I knew better. When I showed him the messages, he didn't even deny it, just looked at me with this blank, tired expression and said, "Can you blame me?" "Look at you," he added, almost with pity. "You're not the woman I married." And that was it. Not a fight, not a breakdown, just those cold, dismissive words. That night I packed a bag. Just one. I left the rest, the house, the memories, the mess, behind. I didn't leave because I was angry. I left because something inside me snapped. Not a loud snap, a quiet final one, like a door closing and locking from the inside. I didn't yell, I didn't ask him to explain. I just walked out of the home I'd built with blood and tears and said goodbye to the life I thought I'd grow old in. I moved in with my sister across town. The kids stayed with me on weekdays and with him on weekends. We didn't tell them everything, just that Mom and Dad were taking time apart. I filed for divorce the next week. No dramatic speeches, just paperwork. He looked shocked when the papers came, like he'd expected me to come crawling back to beg him to stay. I didn't. Instead, I started again. Therapy at first. I didn't even know where to begin. Just knew I had to unpack years of being made to feel small. Then the walks, morning air in my lungs, headphones in, one foot in front of the other. I wasn't trying to lose weight. I was trying to find myself. Over time, walks turned into jogs. Jogging turned into strength training. I changed how I ate, not to be skinny, but to have energy. I started standing straighter, smiling more, sleeping better. The pounds dropped, sure, but what changed more was the mirror. I saw me again. One day, a friend of my sister's mentioned a fitness shoot looking for real women. I laughed it off, but she insisted. "Just go. You've got that glow now." I did it on a whim. The photographer's job practically hit the floor when I walked in. Said I had a natural aura, confidence mixed with vulnerability. He sent the shots to a few places, and somehow it began. Fitness brands, local catalogs, a shampoo ad, small stuff, but enough to build something. And then the message came from him, from Adam. And what he wrote? It was almost comical, surreal even. I stared at my phone for a full 5 minutes, trying to make sense of it. The man who once told me I wasn't desirable anymore had just sent a message to my modeling account, calling me, wait, and I quote, absolutely breathtaking, said I had a glow he couldn't look away from, and that he'd love to take me out sometime, if I was single. I remember sitting on my bed, phone in hand, heart pounding not with excitement, but with a kind of sick, electric disbelief. He didn't recognize me, not even a flicker of suspicion. I guess in his mind, the woman in those photos couldn't possibly be the same one who used to scrub the kitchen floors and cry quietly in the bathroom at night. The woman he left emotionally starving for years. He was messaging me like I was a stranger he wanted to impress. I clicked on his profile. Same smug face, same curated life. Pictures of our kids like he was dad of the year. No trace of Kayla. I wondered what happened there. Did she get bored? Did he cheat on her too? Did she realize, like I had, that beneath his polished exterior was a man who only loved people when they were shiny and easy? Part of me wanted to block him instantly, just hit delete and go on with my life. But another part, the part of me that had once believed every cruel word he said, needed more. Not revenge, not exactly, but something close to closure, on my terms. So I responded, short, polite, flirty, just enough to keep him intrigued. I told him I was new in town. Technically true, since I'd moved neighborhoods after the divorce. I said his message made me smile. I didn't tell him my name, just signed it J. He took the bait. Over the next week, he messaged constantly, complimented my smile, my energy, the way I carried myself like a queen. He said he hadn't felt drawn to someone like this in years, that he kept checking his phone, hoping I'd replied. Each word was a twisted echo of the things he used to withhold from me when I begged for even the smallest crumb of affection. He asked to meet in person, said he didn't usually do this, but something about me felt different. Said he'd love to take me to dinner, somewhere nice. I agreed. We set a date. I gave him the name of a restaurant he used to love, back when we could still afford date nights. I picked the outfit with care, a fitted red dress that hugged every curve. Red had always been his weakness, the kind of red that made men turn their heads and women glance twice. When I walked into the restaurant, I saw him before he saw me. He was sitting at the bar, tapping his phone, probably sending one last message asking if I was on my way. His hair was shorter than I remembered, his face a little more lined, but the arrogance, that was still there, sitting on his shoulders like a tailored suit. I walked up behind him and said his name. He turned, looked up, and his face went pale. "Do I know you?" he asked, standing awkwardly, his eyes scanning mine like he was searching for a memory buried too deep. I smiled, tilting my head just slightly. "You should," I said sweetly. "I'm the woman you threw away." His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Wait, Julia? I could see the recognition creeping in, the way his eyes widened, the way his lips parted in disbelief. He looked me up and down like he couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. You look, I mean, wow. I leaned in, voice soft but razor sharp. "The fat one, remember?" He stammered, reaching out instinctively, as if trying to rewind the moment. "Julia, I didn't know, I swear. I didn't recognize you. You look incredible." But I didn't feel flattered. I felt done. Like I'd finally finished reading a book that used to break my heart on every page. I stood there for another few seconds, just long enough to let the silence press in around us. Then I turned to leave, but he followed me. Out of the restaurant, into the street. "Julia, wait, please. I made a mistake, a huge one. I didn't know what I had. I was an idiot. Just, can we talk?" I didn't stop walking, but he kept following. "Let me explain. Just one coffee, one conversation. Please. I've changed. I'm not the same guy." And that's when I realized something chilling. He sounded exactly like me back then. Desperate, begging, hoping someone would stay. Only now, he was the one left behind. But I wasn't ready to walk away just yet, because he wasn't the only one who needed to learn something. And I had one more surprise left. I didn't reply that night. I let him chase my silence. I let his messages pile up like wreckage. Texts filled with regret, long-winded apologies, vague promises of being better, and a few subtle flexes he probably thought would win me over. Got promoted last quarter, bought a new place near the lake, doing a lot of reflection lately. As if success could rewrite the past. As if the damage he caused could be patched over with money and self-pity. I watched from the sidelines, quietly amused, mildly sickened. And somewhere beneath all that, something else stirred, a flicker of empowerment. For years, I'd lived in the shadows of his approval, begging for scraps of love, validation, acknowledgement. Now, he was begging me. Only he didn't even know the half of it yet. I wasn't just going to ignore him. No, I was going to show him exactly what he lost, in the clearest, most undeniable way. I needed it. Not for revenge, not to humiliate him, though that would be a satisfying side effect, but to reclaim something in myself that he'd trampled on. My worth. So I crafted a plan. I told him finally that I'd been thinking about our conversation, the one where I'd exposed myself, just enough for him to get a taste of who I really was. I said I wasn't sure how I felt, that seeing him again had shaken something loose. I told him he hurt me deeply, but that a part of me was curious to see who he'd become. He jumped on it instantly, said he'd do anything to prove he'd changed, that he'd carried guilt every day since the divorce, that he never stopped thinking about me, about what he did, about how he left things. I asked him to write me a letter. I didn't tell him it was a test. I just said, I wanted to understand where his head was. You said you've reflected, so reflect. Show me, not with flowers or dinners, with words. What he sent me 2 days later was astounding, not because it was beautiful, but because it was such a lie. He painted himself as a broken man, blamed society and work pressure for making him feel like he needed to be with someone younger. Claimed he was ashamed of how he treated me, that he hated himself for saying those things over dinner. But never once, not once, did he admit to cheating. He called it emotional confusion, as if sexting a 24-year-old in his office while I was putting our kids to bed was just a moment of confusion. I laughed out loud. He was rewriting our history to make himself the tragic hero, the man who slipped but found his way back. Classic Adam. So I decided to push further. I messaged him again, said I'd been offered a weekend getaway by a brand I worked with, a spa resort, all expenses paid. Told him I was considering inviting someone. No pressure, I wrote, but if you wanted to come, maybe we could talk. Really talk. His answer came in under a minute. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Anything you want. Just tell me when and where. I chose the resort carefully. Not one of those over-the-top flashy ones. It was sleek, tasteful, expensive enough to feel indulgent, but quiet enough for what I had in mind. When we arrived, he was buzzing with anticipation. He kept sneaking glances at me, complimenting my hair, my clothes, my laugh. Said I looked like I belonged in a magazine. I just smiled, letting him perform. He didn't touch me, not yet. He was being cautious, trying to appear respectful, trying to be the man he thought I wanted. That night we had dinner on the terrace. Candlelight, soft music. He leaned across the table and said, "You know, it's crazy, but I feel like I'm falling in love with you all over again." I looked at him, really looked, at the man who told me I wasn't worth loving, at the man who chose another woman while I was drowning in postpartum depression and stretch marks, at the man who let me believe I was the one who failed. And I smiled, because I was about to tell him the truth, the full truth. But not yet. No, I wanted him to fall just a little deeper, to believe just a little harder, to feel hope before I ripped it away. Because I didn't come to this resort for a reconciliation. I came to bury what was left of our story and make sure he never clawed it back. The next morning, I let him make me breakfast. Not because I wanted it, the man still couldn't scramble eggs without burning them, but because I wanted to watch him try. He was doing that thing again, the overcompensating, the awkward charm, trying to wear the mask of a man who'd changed, who'd seen the error of his ways, and was now worthy of redemption. He offered me coffee like it was some grand romantic gesture, beaming like a fool when I said thank you. We spent the day at the spa, massages, steam rooms, lounging by the pool. He asked me questions about my life, my work, what had changed in me. I told him half truths, said I'd been focusing on myself, that I'd let go of who I thought I had to be, and finally became who I really was. He nodded like he understood, but I could see the confusion behind his eyes. This wasn't the Julia he remembered. I wasn't meek. I wasn't desperate. I didn't tiptoe around his moods or filter myself to keep him comfortable. I had power now, and he felt it. That's what drew him in. By the time dinner came, he was practically glowing. He thought this was a second chance, a fairy tale redemption arc. The part in the movie where the jerk realizes he was wrong and the woman takes him back because love conquers all. He didn't realize he wasn't in a fairy tale. He was in a reckoning. We sat in a private booth, tucked into the corner of the resort's quietest restaurant. Candles flickered between us. He reached for my hand. "Julia," he said softly, "I need to say something." I let him speak. I was so stupid, so blind. You were everything, and I couldn't see it. I don't know why I said those things. I guess I hated myself and took it out on you. But the truth is, you were always incredible. I just didn't deserve you. And now, seeing you again, like this, I want to fix things. I want to try again. I tilted my head. You want to fix things? He nodded eagerly, his eyes locked onto mine. Yes, I do. I'll do whatever it takes. I've changed. I swear I have. And that's when I leaned in, slow and deliberate. "Okay," I whispered. "Then tell me the truth." He blinked. "What truth?" "About Kayla, about the texts, about what you really did while we were married." He froze. I saw the flicker in his eyes, that old instinct to deflect, to dodge, to spin. I don't know what you mean," he said, but I just smiled, ice cold. "You cheated on me, Adam. Not just emotionally, not just with texts. I know everything. You think I didn't see the hotel receipts, the credit card charges, the random work events that magically appeared the same night she was posting pictures in new dresses?" His mouth opened, then closed again. "Julia, don't lie to me again." I cut in, my voice suddenly sharp. "You don't get to lie. Not here. Not now." He looked down at the table, shame flickering across his face for the first time in years. "I'm sorry," he finally whispered. "I was weak. She made me feel young again, like I still mattered. But it meant nothing. I swear to you, it meant nothing." I stared at him for a long moment, and then I stood up. "I believe you," I said softly, "that it meant nothing, because that's what you are to me now. Nothing." His head shot up. "Wait, what?" I pulled a small envelope from my bag and dropped it on the table. Inside were the signed divorce papers he had refused to pick up from his lawyer's office for months. He said he'd been too busy, said there was no rush. Deep down, I think he believed I'd come back. I had them updated, I said. New terms, no joint holidays, no custody confusion, no contact outside of the kids. We're done, Adam, for real this time. He looked stunned, shattered, like someone had knocked the air out of him. "Why did you bring me here?" he whispered. "Why go through all this?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Because I wanted you to feel it. That moment when you realize you destroyed the one person who would have loved you forever. And there's no going back." I walked away. I didn't look back, not when he called my name, not when I heard the chair scrape behind me, not when he asked, almost begged, "Can we at least talk about this?" Because, no, we couldn't. I'd done all the talking I needed to do. But the story wasn't over, because 2 days later, he showed up where he absolutely shouldn't have. And that's when things got complicated. 2 days. That's how long the silence lasted before the knock came at my door. It was a Sunday morning, soft and slow, the kind I used to dream of when I was buried in diapers and dishes. The kids were with my sister for the weekend, and I'd finally planned a day to myself. No work, no errands, just quiet, healing, breathing. Then the knock shattered it. Sharp, repetitive, urgent. I knew. Even before I looked through the peephole, even before I opened the door, I knew it was him. And there he was, Adam, standing on my porch like some wet, broken dog. His eyes were bloodshot, hair unkempt, clothes wrinkled like he hadn't slept. He looked small, not just tired, but shrunk, like the truth of who he was had finally collapsed in on itself. And this mess of a man, was all that remained. "I'm sorry," he said before I could even speak. "I know I shouldn't be here, but I had to see you. I can't stop thinking about everything you said." I didn't move, didn't speak. I just crossed my arms and waited. "I thought I could fix it," he continued, his voice cracking. "I thought if I just said the right things, showed up in the right way, maybe you'd give me another chance. But that resort, that dinner, that look in your eyes when you walked away, I've never felt anything like it. Like I was watching the last door to redemption slam shut." I stayed silent. I wasn't going to rescue him from the weight of his own guilt. Not anymore. He rubbed his face and looked down at the floor. "You know, I used to think I was the prize, that you were lucky to have me. And maybe, once, that was true. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being a man and started being a ghost in your life, just floating, taking, blaming you for my own emptiness." Still, I said nothing. Not because I didn't have words. I had too many. Too much pain, too much history. Too many nights curled in on myself wondering what I had done wrong. So I let the silence sit between us like a loaded gun. He stepped closer, desperation rising in his voice. "I didn't come here to beg. I know it's too late. I see that now. I needed to face what I did. I needed you to see that I'm not hiding anymore. I ruined everything. You were the best thing in my life, and I threw you away like you were nothing. But you weren't nothing. You were everything." I looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time in years, I didn't see the man I married. I didn't see the boy who made promises or the husband who broke them. I saw the man who called me fat, the man who looked at my stretch marks like they were shameful, the man who weaponized my exhaustion against me, who made me feel like love was conditional, like I had to earn being wanted. And I realized something. He didn't deserve forgiveness. Not because people can't change, but because some bridges, once burned, don't get rebuilt. Some wounds don't need soothing. They need scars. So we remember never to let ourselves bleed like that again. "You didn't just ruin our marriage," I said finally. "You ruined me. You hollowed me out until I didn't recognize myself anymore. And now that I've rebuilt, you think you can walk back in and what? Be part of the new version?" His mouth opened, but no words came. "You lost that right," I continued. "You lost me, not just the woman you discarded, but the one I became because of it. And this version, she doesn't need you. She doesn't even want you." I closed the door, and this time it stayed closed. He didn't knock again, but that wasn't the last time I heard from him, because 3 weeks later, a message came from Kayla. Yes, her, the office flirt, the 24-year-old he left emotional breadcrumbs for while I was home drowning in motherhood and guilt. She'd found me, and what she told me changed everything I thought I knew about how deep the betrayal really went. The message came late on a Tuesday night. I was curled up on the couch in a hoodie, scrolling half-mindedly through my phone when the notification popped up on Instagram. I didn't recognize the username at first, a random handle with a profile picture of a golden retriever. I almost ignored it until I read the first line of the message preview. You don't know me, but I think we need to talk. It's about Adam. My stomach dropped. I clicked. The full message was longer, scattered, emotional, typed, like someone who wasn't sure if they should even be saying it. Hi, Julia. I'm sorry if this is weird. I've debated for weeks whether to reach out, but I saw your photos and I finally put the pieces together. I used to work with Adam. I think you know who I am. Kayla. I stared at the name. It was like a slap from the past. The woman who helped detonate my marriage. The one he used to flirt with under my nose. The one I once thought of as a homewrecker, before I realized my home had been falling apart long before she ever walked in. I never wanted to come between you two. The message continued. I didn't even know he was still married when it started. He told me you were separated, that you'd grown distant, that you were more like roommates than partners. I believed him, and I was young, stupid, but when I found out the truth, I ended it. I walked away. I blinked, rereading that line 3 times. She left him? She kept going. He tried to make me stay, told me you didn't care anymore, that you were just waiting for him to file. But I saw through it. I saw what kind of man he really was. It was never about love. It was about control, about validation. He didn't love either of us. He just needed someone to make him feel important again. I felt something twist in my chest. Not pain exactly, more like clarity. A knot that had lived in me for too long starting to loosen. Anyway, she wrote, I'm not messaging you to apologize or to make myself feel better. I just thought you should know. He's still doing it. With another girl, at his new job. She's 19. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Of course he was. It was never about me, never about Kayla, or the new girl, or the next. He was a black hole, constantly pulling in anyone who would orbit him long enough to reflect his own fading light. It had always been that way. I just hadn't seen it. Or maybe I didn't want to. You deserve better, she ended. And for what it's worth, I think you're amazing. I saw your campaign. I didn't recognize you at first, but when I did, damn, you look strong, like someone who made it through hell and didn't let it ruin her. I stared at the screen, the glow of her message lighting up a part of me I hadn't accessed in years. Forgiveness. Not for Adam. No, he didn't get that. But for myself. For the years I spent blaming myself for not being enough. For the nights I thought if I just lost 5 more pounds, cooked one more perfect meal, planned one more date night, maybe he'd want me again. Maybe he'd stop looking at me like I was furniture he'd outgrown. But it was never me. It was him. And now, I saw the full pattern. The way he used charm like a weapon. The way he cycled through women like seasons. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a mirror. Someone who reflected what he needed to see to avoid facing what he actually was. I replied to Kayla with a short message. Thank you. I believe you. And I'm sorry he did it to you too. She sent back a red heart and nothing more. It was enough. I thought that would be the end of it. But 2 days later, my lawyer called. Adam had contested the new divorce agreement, the one we'd finalized, the one I handed to him at the resort. Apparently, he'd filed an appeal, said he'd been coerced under emotional distress. I almost laughed. Almost. But instead, I stood in my kitchen, staring at the email from my attorney, and felt something darker rise in me. He couldn't stand to lose control. Even now, even after everything, he was still trying to pull strings, still trying to reclaim some sliver of power. But what he didn't realize was that I'd been preparing for this for months. And if he wanted a fight, he was about to meet a woman who no longer feared him. I wasn't the same woman who used to beg for scraps of affection across a cold kitchen table. Back then, I would have panicked at Adam contesting the divorce. I would have cried, spiraled, blamed myself, wondered if I'd gone too far. But now, I stood in my sunlit kitchen with steady hands and a calm heart. I reread the lawyer's message once, then again, letting every word settle deep into my bones. "He's trying to reverse the asset agreement," my lawyer had written. "He's claiming emotional coercion, that you used manipulation to pressure him into signing." The irony of it was enough to make me laugh, a quiet, bitter laugh, the kind that comes from surviving too much. Manipulation? This man, who gaslit me into believing I was unlovable, who rewrote the narrative of our entire marriage so he could chase after younger women guilt-free, who called me fat while eating the dinner I cooked with shaking hands. He was accusing me of manipulation? No, not today, not anymore. I took a deep breath, dialed my lawyer, and said 6 words I never thought I'd say with such conviction. "Let's take this all the way." And just like that, the war began. I gathered everything: emails, texts, screenshots, copies of our signed agreement, the messages he sent me afterward, begging for another chance, telling me I was radiant, perfect, everything he ever wanted. The gifts he mailed to my sister's house, the voice notes where he broke down crying about how he messed up and didn't deserve forgiveness. It was all proof that he wasn't coerced. He was just embarrassed, ashamed, desperate to rewrite history before it fully cemented who he really was. But I had my truth, and this time I wasn't letting him twist it. The court date was set for the following month. Just enough time for the anxiety to build, for the weight of everything we'd been through to resurface in new ways. I found myself revisiting old memories, like they were wounds I needed to press one more time, just to see if they still hurt. I remembered the first time he saw me holding our newborn daughter. He kissed my forehead, said I looked like a goddess. And then I remembered the last time we shared a bed, how he rolled over after 10 minutes and said he just wasn't in the mood lately, even though his phone had been buzzing with Kayla's name all week. I remembered the way he used to compliment me just enough to keep me hopeful, but never enough to make me feel whole. He kept me tethered to a version of myself that only existed in his convenience. And now that I'd cut the rope, he was flailing. As the hearing approached, I started seeing a therapist again, not because I felt broken, but because I knew I needed to process everything without bottling it up. She asked me something that stuck with me for days. "What would justice look like for you?" I didn't answer right away. At first, I thought justice meant winning in court, keeping what was rightfully mine, making sure he couldn't touch a dime more than what we'd agreed on. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized justice wasn't about punishing him. It was about reclaiming me. It was walking into that courtroom with my head high, not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally saw my own worth without needing anyone else to confirm it. Still, I'd be lying if I said I didn't want him to squirm a little. And squirm he did. When the day came, I wore a black suit. Sharp lines, soft silk, no distractions. My hair was pulled back, my posture straight, my presence undeniable. I saw him from across the room, shifting in his seat like a boy in trouble. He looked at me like he didn't recognize the woman walking in. Good. The judge reviewed the evidence. My lawyer laid out everything, calmly, precisely, like a surgeon with a scalpel. The signed agreement, the messages that followed, the total lack of any indication that he'd felt coerced. If anything, he'd seemed grateful, desperate even, to get another chance. Adam barely spoke. When he did, his voice shook. He tried to spin the story, said I'd emotionally baited him, that I'd used our past and the trip to manipulate his emotions. But the judge wasn't buying it, especially not after reading the messages he sent to Jules, my modeling alias. The ones where he begged to meet me, the ones where he complimented my figure, the ones where he said he hadn't felt this alive in years. That was the final nail. The judge ruled in my favor. The agreement stood. Adam's appeal was dismissed as baseless, and he was warned that any further attempts to reopen the case could be considered harassment. I walked out of that courtroom into the golden afternoon sun feeling taller than I ever had. Not because I'd won, but because I was free. Completely, finally, undeniably free. But just when I thought the story had reached its final chapter, an unexpected letter arrived. Not from Adam, not from Kayla, not even from the court. It was from his mother. And what she wrote inside turned everything I thought I knew about Adam and myself on its head. When I opened the letter from Adam's mother, I didn't know what to expect. We hadn't spoken since the divorce. She'd always been polite to me, distant, but never cruel. But this wasn't a plea for reconciliation. It wasn't an apology on her son's behalf. It was a confession. She wrote about how Adam had always been the golden boy, how no one ever held him accountable growing up. When he failed college courses, she blamed the professors. When he cheated on his first girlfriend, she said, "Boys will be boys." She told me she finally saw what her indulgence created, a man incapable of respect, of loyalty, of love. She ended with a simple, painful truth. I thought I was protecting him. I see now I was enabling him, and I'm sorry for what it cost you, for what it cost us all. I folded the letter and put it away, not out of sentimentality, but because it marked something deeper than victory. It marked accountability. Even if it came late, it was real. Adam, on the other hand, wasn't finished humiliating himself. After losing in court, his finances took a hit. Not only was he blocked from revising the settlement, but he also had to cover all legal fees. On top of that, his office began whispering about his little Instagram fiasco. One of his coworkers, turns out not a fan of Kayla either, leaked the story. He tried to deny it, of course, but the internet never forgets. Screenshots surfaced, comments he left under my alias, calling me a dream, a goddess, not like the shallow women I usually meet. It didn't take long for people to connect the dots. Kayla dumped him publicly on social media. A long-winded caption about choosing self-worth over toxic men, with a photo of her throwing his designer jacket into a trash bin. By the time the dust settled, Adam had been demoted, ridiculed, and isolated. Friends who once laughed at his jokes about me stopped returning his calls. His reputation, once so carefully maintained, was now a punchline in office group chats. He tried contacting me one last time. A handwritten letter, no envelope, just slid under my sister's door one rainy morning. It was short. I was wrong about everything, about you, about us. You were always the strong one. I just couldn't handle it. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I didn't even respond. Because the truth is, I didn't need to. Justice had already been served, not just in court, not just in the public eye, but in every quiet moment where I stood taller, breathed deeper, and lived freer than I ever had with him. I moved into a small loft uptown a few months later, close to a gym, a yoga studio, and a little cafe where the baristas know my name. I signed a contract with a new agency. Not huge, but promising. They love that I'm not 21, that I have real energy, that I own every room I walk into. And maybe the best part? My daughter, now 10, told me she wants to be strong like me when she grows up. Not beautiful, not skinny, strong. And that, more than any revenge or courtroom win, is what healed the last broken piece of me. As for Adam, he still lingers like a ghost in the background. I hear from old acquaintances that he's laying low, that he lives alone in a downtown rental. No girlfriend, no promotions, just the echo of his own downfall. And sometimes, I wonder if he looks at old photos of us, if he realized he didn't just lose a wife, he lost the best thing that ever happened to him. But that's not my concern anymore, because I didn't rise from the ashes to look back. I didn't rebuild myself just to prove a point to a man who couldn't see past his own ego. I did it for the woman he called worthless, the woman he tried to erase, the woman who now owns every inch of her story. And when people ask how I forgave him, I smile and say, I didn't. I just outgrew him. The last thing he ever saw of me was the back of my head as I walked away, and that's all he'll ever see again.